It started with something so small, something most people wouldn't even notice. But I noticed her hands first. The way her fingers moved across the table during our study group, tapping gently against her coffee mug as if they had a rhythm of their own. Her nails were painted a deep shade of burgundy, polished and neat, catching the light whenever she tilted her hand. I should have been focused on the assignment in front of me, but instead, my gaze followed the graceful dance of her fingers, hypnotized by their elegance. Every time she reached for her pen, the soft scratch of ink across her notebook felt like a secret message written only for me. When she absent-mindedly tucked a strand of her dark hair behind her ear, her slender fingers brushed her cheek in such a delicate way that I found myself holding my breath. There was nothing overtly sexual about it, yet it stirred something deep in me, something warm, aching, and hard to ignore. I told myself not to stare, not to get distracted. She was just another girl in our literature class, someone I'd been paired with for a semester-long project. That was all. But there was something about her presence that pulled me in, a magnetism that lived not in her smile or her eyes, but in the movement of her hands. When she leaned closer to glance at my notes, the back of her hand brushed against mine. The touch was so small it could have meant nothing, but to me, it meant everything. A spark shot through me, low in my belly, spreading in a way that left me both startled and hungry for more. "Sorry," she whispered, her voice soft, her breath warm against my skin. But the way her fingers lingered for that extra half second betrayed her apology. It was careful, measured, as if she wanted to see how I'd react. I forced a smile, trying to play it cool, but inside, my chest was racing. She pulled her hand back slowly, gracefully, her eyes flicking toward me just long enough to make my lips part. She knew. She had to know. From that moment, I couldn't stop staring. At the way she curled her fingers around her coffee cup, the way her thumb traced absent circles against the ceramic as though she was caressing something precious. At the way she gestured when she explained a point, her wrists flicking with ease, her nails catching the light. It wasn't just beauty, it was intention. She spoke with her hands as much as with her voice, and I hung on every movement. The project gave us excuses to meet outside of class, but the assignment was no longer my focus. I just wanted to be near her, to watch her fingers move, to feel that spark again. I didn't know what I was falling into, but I knew this much. I had already fallen for her fingers first. Our meetings became more frequent after that. Technically, we were working on our literature project, annotating novels, discussing themes, and scribbling notes in margins, but the truth was, I barely remembered the books we read together. What I remembered were her hands, always in motion, always pulling me deeper into a quiet fascination I didn't dare name aloud. Sometimes, I thought she noticed my staring. She would twirl her pen between her fingers, the metal glinting as it spun, then glance at me with the faintest smirk, as if daring me to admit what was on my mind. Other times, she'd trace lazy shapes on the edge of her notebook, her nails drumming a rhythm that made my chest flutter. It was subtle, almost innocent, but the more she did it, the harder it became to pretend I wasn't affected. One evening, we met at a small cafe tucked away from the busy street. She slid into the seat across from me, her fingers wrapped around a steaming cup of chai. The first thing I noticed wasn't her smile, it was the way her hands curved perfectly around the mug, the warmth of the drink steaming between her palms. She lifted it slowly, her lips brushing the rim, and I swear I felt the movement as if it had been my skin she touched. "You're quiet tonight," she said, setting her cup down. Her fingers tapped gently against the porcelain, a light, steady beat that seemed to sync with my heartbeat. I forced a laugh. "Just tired, I guess." Her eyes narrowed playfully, her lips quirking into a half-smile. "Or distracted?" The word lingered between us, heavy and deliberate. My throat tightened. She wasn't just guessing, she knew. I tried to hide my reaction by flipping through our notes, pretending to focus. But then her hand slid across the table, just close enough that her fingertips grazed mine. Not a full touch, not enough for anyone to notice, but enough to make my skin burn where she had brushed me. "See?" she murmured, her voice low, distracted. I swallowed hard, my pulse racing, but I didn't move my hand away. Instead, I let the silence stretch, the air thick with something unspoken, something dangerous and thrilling. She pulled her fingers back after a moment, curling them around her pen instead. But she was smiling now, and I realized this was a game. A quiet, teasing game where every brush of her fingers, every deliberate pause, every lingering glance carried weight. And I was hooked. After that night, I noticed how she would test me, tapping my wrist lightly when I got lost in thought, sliding a sheet of paper toward me with her nails grazing my knuckles, letting her hand rest just a fraction too long when she passed me my coffee. Each touch was small enough to be innocent, but together, they told a different story. I didn't know if I was imagining it, if maybe my attraction was painting meaning where there was none. But the way she smiled when her fingers found me, the way her eyes softened with amusement, told me it wasn't one-sided. It was unspoken, but it was there. And every day, I found myself craving her touch a little more. By the third week of working together, it wasn't just about the project anymore. Our notes were scattered, half-finished, and often abandoned in favor of quiet conversations that stretched long past the time we were supposed to leave. She had a way of pulling me in with the smallest gestures, her chin resting in her palm while she studied me, the slow curl of her fingers around a straw, or the light flick of her nail against the table when she was teasing me. I started to wonder if I was imagining it all, if my attraction was making me read too much into things. But then there were the moments I couldn't ignore. Like the evening we sat side by side in the campus library, the soft glow of the desk lamp painting shadows across our notes. She leaned closer, her shoulder brushing mine, her fingers trailing down the margin of my notebook as she corrected something I'd written. Her touch wasn't necessary. She could have just spoken the correction or pointed. But instead, her fingertip moved slowly, deliberately, tracing the words in a way that made goosebumps rise across my arms. "You missed a line," she murmured, her breath warm against my ear. I shifted in my seat, my body buzzing, every nerve on fire just from the press of her skin against paper that was technically mine. I nodded, pretending to fix the line, but all I could think about was how close her hand was to mine, how easily she could slide it across the small gap and take hold of me completely. But she didn't. She pulled back, her lips curving into a small, secret smile, as if she knew exactly what she was doing. Later that night, as we packed our things, she reached for my pen without asking. Her fingers brushed against mine, light but intentional, and I froze. Instead of pulling away, she lingered, her fingertips resting against the back of my hand for just a heartbeat too long. "Borrowing this," she said casually, but her eyes lingered on mine, heavy and unblinking. My throat tightened. "Keep it," I whispered, my voice lower than I meant it to be. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was charged, alive, like the air before a storm. She smiled then, slow and knowing, and slid the pen into her bag. Walking home that night, my hands ached for her. It wasn't just a crush anymore, it was something raw and magnetic, pulling me closer to her with every passing day. I wanted to know what those fingers would feel like if they weren't hiding behind notebooks or coffee mugs. I wanted them on me, against me, inside me. And though we hadn't spoken it aloud, I could feel it. She wanted the same. The shift happened slowly, almost imperceptibly, like the way dusk settles into night. One evening, we were sitting in her apartment instead of the cafe or the library. She'd invited me over under the excuse of fewer distractions, but the truth was, she was the distraction. Her space smelled faintly of jasmine and coffee, a mix so warm it made my chest tighten the moment I walked in. We spread our books across her couch, pages open but forgotten within minutes. She sat closer than usual, her thigh brushing against mine whenever she shifted. At first, I thought it was coincidence, but then she didn't move away. If anything, she pressed a little closer, her warmth seeping into me until I could barely think. As she explained something about our reading, her hand landed softly on my knee. It wasn't purposeful, at least, not obviously, but the heat of it lingered, her fingers curving gently against the fabric of my jeans. My breath caught. I told myself not to read into it, but when I glanced at her, her lips curved into the faintest smile. "You're not listening, are you?" she teased, her voice low. I swallowed. Not really. Her hand slid just a fraction higher, her nails grazing lightly as though she was testing how much I could handle. My entire body leaned toward her without permission, my pulse drumming so loud I was sure she could hear it. "Thought so," she whispered. The air between us thickened, heavy with everything we'd been avoiding. My eyes flicked to her lips, then back to her fingers still resting on my thigh. I could no longer pretend this was innocent. She wasn't just teasing anymore, she was waiting. I shifted, turning to face her more fully, and in that moment, she let her hand slide higher, stopping just above my knee. The touch was careful, deliberate, her fingers pressing lightly as if she was asking a silent question. "Yes," I breathed, though she hadn't spoken. Something shifted in her eyes then. Softness mixed with fire, and before I could blink, she leaned in, her mouth brushing mine. The kiss wasn't rushed. It was slow, searching, as though we both knew we had been building toward this moment all along. Her fingers tightened slightly on my thigh, grounding me as her lips moved against mine, gentle but hungry. When she finally pulled back, her hand still lingered. "I wondered how long it would take you to admit it," she murmured, her thumb drawing slow circles against my skin. I laughed breathlessly, dazed. "Admit what?" "That you've been staring at my hands since the first day." Heat flushed through me, but I didn't deny it. Instead, I slid my own hand over hers, finally touching her fingers the way I had imagined for weeks. They curled into mine instantly, warm and sure, and for the first time, I didn't have to wonder anymore. We had crossed the line, and there was no going back. After that first kiss, nothing felt the same. It was as if the invisible wall we had carefully built between us had finally crumbled, leaving nothing but desire raw and exposed. Every look lasted longer, every touch carried weight. Even the silence felt thick, laced with anticipation. She leaned back against the couch, her eyes holding mine with quiet confidence. Her hand was still resting on my thigh, her fingers tracing absent shapes as if she was memorizing me through touch alone. I covered her hand with mine, threading my fingers through hers, finally daring to claim what I had been craving for weeks. Her lips curved into a soft smile. "Took you long enough," she whispered, leaning closer until her breath tickled the corner of my mouth. I kissed her again, this time with less hesitation. Her lips were warm, pliant, tasting faintly of wine she'd sipped earlier. She kissed like she touched. Measured but deliberate, every movement intentional, every graze of her tongue a question she already knew the answer to. Her free hand moved up, brushing against my jaw before sliding into my hair. She tugged gently, pulling me deeper into her. My body responded before my mind could catch up, heat pooling in places that made my breath falter. When we broke apart, she didn't let the moment cool. Her fingers slipped from my hair to trail down my neck, featherlight, leaving goosebumps in their wake. I shivered, leaning into her touch, hungry for more. "Do you always react this much to just a touch?" she teased, her voice husky now, her thumb grazing the hollow of my throat. "Yes," I admitted without shame, my pulse racing beneath her fingertips. "At least to yours." Her laugh was soft, but full of satisfaction. She leaned in again, kissing me with more urgency, and I melted against her. The couch became too small, too limiting, as if it couldn't contain the pull between us. She shifted closer, pressing her body against mine, the warmth of her chest flush with my shoulder, her thigh sliding against mine in a way that made my heart stutter. I let my hands roam at last, sliding up her arm until I could cup her shoulder, then drifting lower until my palm rested at her waist. Her skin burned even through the thin fabric of her shirt. She tilted her head, deepening the kiss, her fingers tightening in my hair until all I could do was surrender. Time blurred. The room fell away. There was only her lips, her hands, her fingers everywhere at once, claiming me in ways that made me ache for more. When she finally pulled back, both of us breathing hard, her fingers slid down to capture my hand again. She lifted it slowly, pressing her lips against each of my knuckles one by one, her eyes never leaving mine. "You fell for my fingers first," she murmured, her voice low, "but I plan on making sure you fall for everything else too." And I believed her. The moment stretched between us, thick with heat and want. I could still feel the ghost of her lips against my knuckles, her words sinking into my skin like a promise I couldn't wait to unwrap. Her fingers slipped from mine only to trail upward again, her touch featherlight across the inside of my wrist. I shivered. "You're so sensitive," she whispered, eyes glinting with both mischief and tenderness. Her thumb circled the thin skin where my pulse raced wildly, and she leaned forward to kiss me again, slower this time, deeper, as though she was savoring the way I trembled beneath her. I melted against her, my hands sliding up her arms, finally bold enough to explore the curves I had been imagining for weeks. Her shirt was soft beneath my palms, but what burned was the warmth of her body underneath. She shifted closer until she was practically in my lap, her thighs bracketing mine, her fingers never stopping their careful exploration. When her hand skimmed the side of my ribcage, I gasped, not from surprise, but from the way my body craved more, begged for it. She smiled against my lips, catching the sound like it was a gift. "You like that?" she murmured, not a question but a statement. All I could do was nod, heat flooding through me. Her fingers continued their slow journey, teasing the hem of my shirt before slipping underneath. The first brush of her skin against my bare stomach made me shiver so hard that I grabbed onto her wrist instinctively. She stilled, giving me space, her eyes searching mine. "Tell me if I go too far," she said softly, her tone steady, full of care. My chest ached at the gentleness in her voice, even as my body screamed for more. I released her wrist, guiding her hand back against my skin. "Don't stop." Her breath hitched, just barely, before her fingers obeyed, gliding upward with deliberate slowness, leaving trails of fire in their wake. She kissed me again as her hand explored, her lips and her touch weaving together until I was undone, clinging to her shoulders as though she were the only thing keeping me upright. The world outside her apartment didn't exist anymore. There was only her, the softness of her lips, the warmth of her thighs pressing against mine, the steady, teasing rhythm of her fingers as they learned the shape of me. She moved with confidence, but also with care, as though she wanted to know not just my body, but how I responded, what made me gasp, what made me melt. I had thought I'd fallen for her fingers first, because of how beautiful they looked in motion. But now, as they mapped me with tenderness and intent, I realized I was falling all over again for how they made me feel, for how she made me feel. Desired. Seen. Wanted in a way I'd never dared to crave before. And it was only the beginning. By then, every ounce of restraint between us had dissolved. The way her fingers explored me was no longer tentative, but certain, confident, as if she already knew I belonged to her touch. My breath came fast and uneven, every nerve in my body alive, begging for more. She kissed me harder, deeper, her tongue sliding against mine as her hand continued its slow, teasing path beneath my shirt. When her fingertips finally brushed against the curve of my breast, I gasped, clutching at her shoulders as though the sound might steady me. She smiled against my lips, the kind of smile that knew exactly what it was doing to me. "You're shaking," she murmured, her voice low and husky. "Because of you," I admitted, my voice trembling, stripped bare of any pretense. Her response was another kiss, hungrier now, laced with need. She pushed me gently back against the couch, her body pressing flesh against mine, her weight both grounding and intoxicating. I wrapped my arms around her, pulling her closer, desperate to feel every inch of her. Her hand moved with purpose now, sliding lower, slipping past the waistband of my jeans. The first touch of her fingers against bare skin made my whole body arch, a soft cry escaping my lips before I could stop it. She stilled for a heartbeat, her eyes meeting mine, searching. "Tell me," she whispered, her breath ragged. "Do you want this?" "Yes," I gasped without hesitation, my voice breaking under the weight of need. God, yes. That was all she needed. Her fingers moved with aching slowness at first, drawing circles that made me tremble, teasing me until I thought I might come undone from anticipation alone. My nails dug lightly into her back as I clung to her, the rhythm of her touch pulling sounds from me I'd never made before. She kissed me through every breath, every moan, as though she wanted to capture the very essence of my unraveling. Her fingers knew exactly how to coax pleasure from me, firm, tender, relentless. The world narrowed to nothing but sensation, the heat of her body against mine, the slick slide of her touch, the dizzying sweetness of her mouth on my skin. When release finally tore through me, it was overwhelming, my body arching into her hand, my voice breaking as waves of pleasure rolled over me. She held me through it, her lips pressed to my neck, whispering soft words I couldn't fully hear, only feel. By the time I collapsed against her, trembling and breathless, she was smiling, her fingers still entwined with mine. She looked at me like I was something precious, something rare. "I told you," she said softly, brushing her lips against my temple. "You fell for my fingers first. But now," she kissed me again, tender and sure. "Now you've fallen for me." And she was right. The room was quiet except for our breathing, both of us tangled together on her couch. My skin was still buzzing, every nerve alive from what had just happened. I lay half across her, my head resting against her chest, listening to the steady rhythm of her heartbeat. It calmed me in a way nothing else could, grounding me after the storm she had pulled me through. Her fingers hadn't let go of me. They were no longer urgent, no longer teasing. Instead, they traced soft, languid patterns across my arm, my hip, wherever she could reach. The touch was tender, almost reverent, as though she was memorizing me in the quiet aftermath. I closed my eyes, sighing contentedly. "I think you've ruined me," I whispered, my voice low, still rough from breathless moans. She chuckled softly, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. "Ruin you? Or save you?" I tilted my head to look at her, her dark hair falling in loose waves across her face. There was something in her eyes I hadn't let myself notice before, something beyond desire. Warmth. Care. A softness that wrapped around me as surely as her arms did. Both, I admitted with a smile. Her fingers trailed down my cheek, tipping my chin up gently until our eyes locked. "Good," she said simply, before kissing me again, slow, unhurried, the kind of kiss that didn't demand anything, only promised everything. We stayed like that for what felt like hours, caught in the haze of intimacy, trading soft kisses and whispered words. At some point, she pulled a blanket over us, her body curling protectively around mine. I let myself sink into her, safe, cherished, every inch of me still humming from the way she'd touched me. It struck me then how it had all started, how I'd fallen, not for her smile or her laugh first, but for the quiet poetry of her hands. And now, lying in her arms, I realized those fingers weren't just skilled in pleasure. They held me with gentleness, with patience, with a kind of certainty I hadn't known I needed. "I don't want this to be just tonight," I confessed softly, my voice betraying the vulnerability I'd been holding back. Her hand tightened around mine, her thumb brushing over my knuckles with quiet reassurance. "It won't be," she said firmly, her gaze steady, unwavering. "I don't touch someone like this if I don't mean it." My heart swelled at her words, the final piece falling into place. This wasn't just lust, wasn't just a fleeting moment of passion. This was something real, something deeper. As I drifted in the warmth of her arms, I thought back to that very first touch, the brush of her hand against mine in the cafe, the way it had lit something inside me I couldn't ignore. I had fallen for her fingers first, yes. But now, fully, irrevocably, I had fallen for her. And I knew, without a doubt, I wasn't getting back up.